Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. I'm Doug Buchanan, Editor-in-Chief of Columbus Business First. I'm also proud to serve as a member of CMC's Board of Trustees and Chair of CMC's Editorial Board, the Program Committee. Welcome to today's program, How Immigrants Revitalize Communities. Thank you to our sponsors, the United Way of Central Ohio and Taft Law. Thank you to the presenting sponsor for today's live stream, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation. We're also grateful to the Columbus Dispatch for supporting today's forum as a live stream and advertising partner, and thank you to the Ellis for once again hosting CMC. Every CMC forum takes a village, so let's thank everyone for supporting today's program. Okay, on to the program. A leading contributing factor behind population growth in Central Ohio is immigrants and refugees. In recent years, of newcomers to Central Ohio coming here from outside the state, half are immigrants to the U.S. Central Ohio's reputation for affordable living and employment opportunities have made the region an attractive destination for immigrants, but attitudes toward immigration are shifting yet again in America, and Columbus is no longer as affordable as it was just a decade ago. So, can our region continue to attract immigrants to fill critical jobs and add to our cultural and economic vitality? To help answer this question and many more, we're thrilled to welcome today's esteemed panelist, Kim Emsch, founder and executive director of FESTA. Right here, give her applause. Euchemia Wakiesen Jeter, she's council president and mayor of the city of Upper Arlington and a partner with Taft Law. Sudarshan Pakurale, Executive Director of the Bhutanese Community of Central Ohio. Okay. Guadalupe Velasquez, Managing Director of Welcoming City. There we go. And our host, Peter Gill, immigration reporter for the Columbus Dispatch. Peter, welcome to CMC. We're looking forward to today's conversation. The podium is yours.
Great. Well, thank you all. Thank you all for being here. Maybe to start off, could you each just give me a bit of background about yourselves, how you came to work with immigrants in Greater Columbus and the work you do today?
Sure. I'm Kim Emsch. I'm the founder and executive director of FESTA. And I've lived in Ohio my whole life. I came from Toledo to Columbus to go to college at Capitol. And fast forward to 2007, I was living in Hilliard. I learned that there were 2,158 children in my suburban town who were facing poverty. They got a free lunch and went without in the summer. I had prayed and asked God to light my heart on fire right before learning that. And we started free summer lunch camp in Hilliard, and I went and met amazing, beautiful, gifted, talented children, many of whom families were not originally from the United States. And soon children were translating for their parents. Parents started asking where they could learn English. We looked all over. Central Ohio found very few adult English programs. So we started English programming with our after-school programming and then added preschool to it and invented a 3-generation family English program that is serving 1,214 people today.
Well, hello. Hello? Oh, look at that. It worked. It's magic. Hi, I'm Euchemia Wakiesen Jeter, as you heard from the intro. I wear a couple hats. I'm a partner at Taft Law. Started my career as an engineer, though, and pivoted into law. And I'm also council president of the city of Upper Arlington, which is sitting right in front of me. Thanks for being here, guys. But in addition to that, I'm the author of a book coming out in June called Immigrant, and I'm an immigrant myself. So I immigrated to the United States a little over 2 decades ago. I know it's tough to tell, but I immigrated here for college. I went to the University of Maine, And that's where my immigrant story started. I have been on a series of different visas, and I'm a U.S. citizen now, but that was quite a journey to get there. And the impetus for the book that I authored is about immigrant leadership and how immigrant leaders help drive business. And the idea for that book actually came 2 years ago when I was back at my alma mater. I had the honor of giving the commencement speech to the class of 2022. And after that speech, a couple of international students came up because I obviously was telling a little bit about my immigrant story and the journey to where I am today. It was sad to learn from those students that were about to embark in the workplace that they did not see their immigrant experiences as valuable leadership competencies. And that was very disheartening for me to hear, and that's what led me to write the book, because while immigrants are not a monolithic group by any means, the very journey of leaving what you know and reestablishing your life in a new country comes with a common set of competencies that all immigrants possess. So it's an honor to be here on this panel with all of you and kind of share a little bit about immigration.
Hello, everyone. I would say namaste. My name is Sudarshan Pekriel. I was born in a middle-class family in Bhutan to happy parents. But what happened in the 1990s in Bhutan kicked out my parents along with a good number of our community fellows who were minority Nepali-speaking Hindus in southern Bhutan. That led to over 17 years of a refugee life in Nepal in the UN refugee camp. It's where pretty much I grew up, because when I left Bhutan, I was 10. By the time the resettlement opportunity came, I was 28. Although in the refugee camp, I had this dream to pursue education, and I went to India. I did my bachelor's in economics and then did master's in English literature. And then finally, I felt like I wanted to help my community members and went to law school. We are exchanging degrees here, but when I was in the law school, the resettlement started, and I left law school to come to the United States. And I thought my education was done, because how many years I can go to school. And so when I came to Cleveland in 2010, I found that many in my community weren't even able to buy a train tickets. If you are in Cleveland, you would know the rapid system. You have to buy a ticket from a vending machine. And it's where my advocacy work. One day I was standing on a line in a vending machine to buy a ticket for a fellow community members. I was almost bullied by a local fellow there. At the time, I didn't know why he was so angry and mad. And I was just trying to help people buy tickets. He thought that maybe I was scamming people because I was taking their credit card, buying a ticket, and giving to them. And that led to being in the advocacy position and talk to people. And quickly I realized that without me having an American degree, my advocacy work wasn't going anywhere. I went back to college. I got an associate degree, and I got another bachelor's degree from Ohio State University. And in the meantime, I was doing some research and wanting to go for a PhD program. But it so happened that they hired me at the Bhutanese Community of Central Ohio in 2016. And since then, I'm there. Every year I said, I'm done, I'm going away. And that never happens. While trying to run away, I got another degree. Now I'm a licensed social worker. I'm a medical licensed social worker and a therapist. But a lot of my work revolves around advocacy for immigrants and refugees in general. With that, we have now one of the highest Bhutanese Nepali population in Central Ohio, around 30,000. I know all 30,000 would not come to my door every single day. That would be a mess. But a good majority of them need help at some point of time. And so I work in coordination, in collaboration with other resettlement agencies and refugee immigrant serving agencies to solve the needs in the community in every single day. And that's my everyday thing. And I see Dr. Salesi here, just an amazing partner in addressing the immigrant refugee issues. And he inspired me every day to do the things that I do. But I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. Bienvenidos. Guadalupe Velasquez. I am originally from Lorain, Ohio. And if you know our Ohio's history, the shipyards are there. So I grew up with Eastern Europeans, African Americans, people from the Latino community, many diverse migrants went to Lorain for work, right, for the shipyards and then the steel mill and then the Ford Motor Company and other car companies. And then I moved to Columbus. I want to say it was 1988. My brother opened a salon, Raphael's Studio, and it's still in existence. And I was in the beauty industry, actually. So I was an educator for the distributors. So I did nails, makeup, skincare at the salon, and then I trained on the weekends at conferences and such. But I have to admit that in 1987, I was not a happy person, and I made a goal of leaving within 3 to 5 years because there was not much diversity in Central Ohio. The only place that I really saw diversity was at Ohio State University. And when Ohio State University was out, like during the summer, Columbus was different, right? It was just a different community. And so I left within 3 years, moved to other cities, including Toronto, Canada, and ended up, I went through the NAFTA, visa program, and I ended up having to, after a couple of years there, prove I wasn't taking a job for a Canadian. So I was like, where can I go to work indefinitely? Call your brother, right? So I ended up back here in Central Ohio, and the landscape was very different. Columbus started to see an influx of immigrants and refugees from all over the world. And so I was still set to leave. At least for the first 5 years I was here, I was like, I'm leaving. But it became more and more diverse. And I want to thank Kim today because she's the one who raised the question about us having this conversation. And what I learned about social change through being a former board member of the Women's Fund of Central Ohio is the social change that tipping point happens when we advocate for others. And here Kim today is a perfect reflection of that. But I would be remiss to say there are so many people, Dr. Saleshi, the United Way, Michael, when you do your presentation about demographics, you never fail to, provide the immigrant story, right? Columbus Foundation, Ibrahima, advocating for others, and many people, Dorothy Hassan, Dr. Dorothy Hassan, and that makes me want to stay in Central Ohio and belong. And so I'll just say from there, eventually through my advocacy, I ended up working for the City of Columbus as Mayor Coleman's New Americans Initiative coordinator, and then the Assistant Director of Community Relations. And now I do consulting and work for Welcoming City. Yes, Welcoming City. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. One thing that I'm reminded of every time I interview immigrants for my job is that everybody comes here with their own unique background. But we often talk about two main categories of foreign-born people coming to this country, immigrants and refugees. And so I was wondering, Ukeme and Sudarshan, maybe you could walk us through a little bit the differences between those categories, and here in Greater Columbus, how do some of the major foreign-born groups fall into those two categories?
Yeah, sure thing. And, we're fortunate on this panel to have one of each, me being an immigrant and Sachan being a refugee. So I'll let him define that. But I think the main thing the main difference between the two groups is whether it's voluntary or involuntary, right? So immigrants, you voluntarily leave your country or place for a myriad of reasons, right? For some, it's economic opportunity, others education, maybe reunification with your family. Could be a series of reasons that you voluntarily make that choice. And then there are hoops you need to go through for that your immigrant status, right? So there's varied degrees of what those statuses can be depending on what country that you immigrate to. And then the final intent is usually an intent to live in the place that you're immigrating to, because that adds an additional layer. We hear about migrants, right? So migrants generally are immigrants, but they don't have an intent to live in that country. So they are moving there just for work and have goals to go anywhere else. So that's the major thing about what an immigrant is: intentionally leaving their place voluntarily to another with an intent to live there.
Peter, does this question profile us as refugee and immigrant? No. So I was just joking. So the point here is, it'll take a little bit of while for you to laugh. Yes, refugees do laugh. Adding to what Ukeme said, refugees, what we see, what we term them as, is the push factor. And for immigrants, is the pull factor. And push factor, what do I mean by push factor is, when they leave their country in the first place, they have been evicted. The law, the government, or the entity that pushed them out, it sort of adds trauma to the refugee. And when they are in a refugee camp, they stay there indefinitely, in my own case. Although we were wanting to go back to Bhutan, but that wasn't an option. And when resettlement comes, still it does not come with an option. Either you go for a resettlement or you be in a refugee camp indefinitely. And again, that's a push factor. So what we have to understand from my perspective is that when I was in a refugee camp in Nepal, we weren't saying that we wanted to go to Europe or America. That was the only option given to us. So it's the same rule applies to all refugees. Either you be in a refugee camp indefinitely, or you go to your last destination. So it's all push factor. And what does the push factor does is that by the time refugee arrives in the host country, they are exhausted, they are tired, they don't have resources, they have to depend on someone. They are highly dependent on the agencies. But immigrant comes here with plan. They come with either education opportunity, employment opportunity, or business opportunity. They have resources to start their life. So in the beginning years, you would see that refugees need help, and government invest to some extent money to give them a good quick start. But however, after a couple of years, if you look into immigrants and refugees in terms of economic contribution, you'll not find any differences. But one thing that refugees carry, and although immigrants do to a great extent, is trauma and mental health. Unaddressed trauma and mental health continues to linger in their life. But in a technical term, when refugees arrive here, that one distinction that you may want to know is they are fully documented. While I'm not against undocumented people, they're fully documented, and refugees go into the path to become citizen within a short period of time. That's one technical advantage refugees will have over immigrants.
Great.
And then if I could just bring up, because we are seeing it more and more here in the United States, the term asylee. And so there's a lot of attention at the south border. But when we look at an asylee is very much within the same category as a refugee. However, the United Nations predetermine what countries are to be designated, and the status of people leaving there would be refugees. And so when people are coming to our border, they're not trying to knock down the invisible border. They are coming to the border and they are saying, I am requesting asylum. And if anybody remembers the famous ballet dancer Baryshnikov, this was a very, and even the last Olympics, there are at times special circumstances where the U.S. wanted a foreign-born person to represent the United States. And so they did the paperwork. And we didn't hear about that in the news like we hear about it, right, with the asylees at the border. So please understand that when you hear the word asylee, that is still someone asking to make the United States their home, and they're fleeing religious persecution, political persecution, and or very high crimes and violence.
Great. Thanks, Sudarshan and Ukeme, and thanks for the clarification, Guadalupe. I wanted to talk a little bit about the reason why we're seeing this growth in Columbus's foreign-born population, which now is about 10% of Greater Columbus, or the metro statistical area, and that doesn't even include children of immigrants here. So perhaps Guadalupe and Kim, you could talk a little bit about kind of what is it that makes Greater Columbus an attractive place for immigrants, refugees, asylees to come and settle rather than somewhere else in the U.S.?
Yes. Oh, go ahead.
So some people, when they're coming here, if they're a refugee, it's identified for them to come to Ohio or Columbus. But other people, I've asked lots of people over 17 years, how did you end up in Columbus? And some, again, came straight from overseas to Columbus, others from other places in our country to Columbus. And many people have said to me, it's the Midwest. You're known as being friendly, nice people. It's also relatively a good cost of living compared to other places, the East or West Coast, for example. And also, again, the work that I've been doing for 17 years, I feel like Columbus is a very special place. I feel it every day. I feel that people care about their neighbors. People will say to me, I care about someone on the other side of the world, and I might send money or maybe go on a mission trip, but I really care about my neighbors. And so that feeling, people who are new to our city feel. I believe they feel that. And so I think that's a piece of it. And there are 97,000 children in Columbus who have at least one immigrant parent. I'm all about children. I think they're amazing and just so amazing. And so that's a huge number. As Peter said, the other number doesn't include them. And I think that our city has lots of businesses who are national or international businesses who've started here. So in terms of getting work, getting a job, it's a good city to be as well. So those are some of the reasons that I think Columbus is special in those ways.
Through the years, I've been involved in a lot of national cohorts and regional cohorts, and I can definitely share with you that other than Chicago in the Midwest, Franklin County has the largest percentage, right, of immigrants. And so that includes immigrants, undocumented immigrants, refugees. When we talk about the foreign board, I just want to be clear on that definition. International students, people that are working here on visas. So all of that is encompassing our foreign board population. And again, when I began here in 1995, I would say about 5 years into it, there was data regarding Franklin County, and it said if Franklin County, but really it applied to the state, if we grew 1%, 50% of that was due to the immigrant, refugee, foreign-born population. And then it went up about 8 years after that, and it was 80% of our growth. And I remember Mayor Coleman doing a study because through that study we discovered that our largest export in Ohio were young people. Right? So that's how the Youth Commission started. And so, again, immigrants aren't taking from the community, right? They're contributing by being here and working, because as they work, the tax base grows. And so I wanted to make sure that I shared that. But simultaneously, the Midwest, going to what Kim said, the Midwest became a gateway city. So gateway cities are traditionally New York, Miami, right? The West Coast. It would be your first entry. But as Kim said, people started coming to Central Ohio and realizing we had outstanding affordable housing for many years, good schools. There's always employment, because Columbus and Central Ohio is always growing. And so it was that, and then the environment itself that was being organically welcoming. Let me see. Yep. So that's what I want to share.
How do you see immigrants changing or shaping Greater Columbus politically, economically, socially? And that's a big question, but I was thinking maybe you could break it down by talking about, some of the areas of town that you're most familiar with. Sorry, go ahead if you want to have one thing to add.
I just wanted to add something that was very critical to why people are coming. We don't talk about it enough. Second migration. So that is also, people are living here, so they're staying, but then they're also inviting other people to move to Central Ohio because it's friendly, because it's affordable. And so again, the power in the word of mouth.
Right, definitely. Anyway, how about if you can talk about like a neighborhood or a specific city that you're familiar with, what are some of the impacts that you're seeing?
I can start and colleagues can add here. I think one of the things that you wanted to see how immigrants are changing the landscape of Central Ohio. If you haven't been, go to Northland area. Drive down the Morse Road and you'll see. And you just need a picture, Google picture something 10 years ago, how that landscape is changing completely. And you would see many new businesses coming up. They are just pending and denting old business, buying and starting new business. You would see many, many homes owned by immigrants and refugees in that area. Now, if you drive a little bit down, if you go to Reynoldsburg, we have a large community in Reynoldsburg, and to your question, Peter, we have now an elected council member in Reynoldsburg who is a Vietnamese Nepali, former refugee from Bhutan. And so politically engaged in the process, as well as that community has changed to a great extent that if you are in a main street in Reynoldsburg, you'd see Nepali stores there, the grocery store, clothing line, jewelry stores, and you name it, and then real estate business, insurance companies, all lined up together. And every single time, the statistic says that the likelihood of an immigrant starting a business is 3 times higher than the mainstream community. And also you can see the contribution that immigrant and refugee make in Central Ohio. I'm not giving my number. The New American Economy, which is a bipartisan group that does studies economic impact in all over America, says that every year in Central Ohio, refugee immigrant contributes $2.1 billion to local economy. And that's growing every single year. I think the study that was done in 2015, the refugee impact studies, says $1.6 billion. Now it's a $2.1 billion, and every year that's growing. So in the beginning, refugee and immigrant may seem to be taking a little bit of time and cost to start sort of that one, but once they take on, they become the engine hub. Now, I wanted to add one more example that we started working with Amazon recently in a very small lens, but we wanted to grow that work that we are doing at Amazon. And they say that 30% of their associates are Nepali speaking. 70% of associates in some of their warehouse are either immigrants or refugees. And I asked them, theoretically, let's say tomorrow we decided to move to Pennsylvania. He said, we will move our factory to Pennsylvania. That's as simple as that one. And so how we are impacting, you can understand. Yeah. Kim, do you want to add? Yeah.
I'm a storyteller, so I want to bring it practical for you. So at our free summer lunch camp, there's a young man who started coming when he was 7, and in 2012, he helped invent inside of our free summer lunch camp something that became known as Taco Bell Jr. The children were bored with the activities that I was planning, and so they wanted to do something different. And I said, I'm a dream catcher. What do you want to do here? They said, we want to start our own business. And so they started a restaurant inside the free summer lunch camp that continues today through our family English program as well. And when I say children, please picture 2nd to 8th graders, very young children. And this young man, today I had lunch with him 2 weeks ago. And let me say too, his family has been living in a trailer park, and it's what I have found the least expensive place in all of Greater Central Ohio to live. He had a dream of being a meteorologist. I have a video of him sitting like I'm sitting with a microphone like this when he was 8, and I saw that in him. So he went to Ohio State University, just graduated last May with a double major in mathematics and meteorology. He saved his money the whole time working at McDonald's. He's now a general manager through college, kept saving his money. I had lunch with him 2 weeks ago to talk about how he just bought a house, and he's 23 years old. So when we talk about the economic impact of immigrants, that's what I see every day. Lastly, when you say where are immigrants? They're our neighbors. They're every single one of your neighbors. The people coming to our family English program are coming from 39 zip codes. 39. So people will say, sometimes we started in Hilliard, they'll say, oh, are you a Hilliard ministry? No, people are coming from 39 zip codes, 54 countries of origin, so literally all over the globe. The other part, I think, the impact of immigrants in our community, when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, another story quickly. But a man named Bob has been a volunteer with us for a decade. You could see a video we just put out yesterday on our social media to tell him telling his story. But he really aspired, he started thinking after 9/11, he started really thinking, I'm not sure I want those people in our country. And he grew up in a very racist home, quite frankly. And he has been a volunteer with us for 10 years. His wife started volunteering. He wasn't sure if he wanted to come. He came after about a year. He is so committed. His life is so changed. His heart is so changed that as a man in his 60s, he's learning Arabic, Spanish, and his brand new students this year are from the Ukraine, and he's learning their language now. And he says, I am a completely changed person. So both the immigrant impact in our city as well as the change that I need to have in my heart, that we need to have in our heart, is all impacted by immigrants.
Absolutely, Kim. And so we don't talk enough about, there is economic impact, but there's social impact and also cultural impact. And so Sudarshan mentioned Northland, and for anybody that's new to Columbus, Northland was the Easton of Columbus back in the day. And then Easton was created, the city center in the Easton. But we also have other corridors. So Bethel Road was, a very, very much a hot spot or street with many businesses, but then there was a turnover, right? And so where blight would normally exist or exist in Columbus, you can see there are international corridors. So we're talking about Morris Road, Bethel Road, Sawmill Road, East and West Broad, East and West Main Street. These are all what I refer to as international corridors.
I'm going to skip over a few questions just because we're running a little short on time. But, just going off of what you were talking about with economic contributions of immigrants and refugees, I know that recently, like in the last 3 years, Ohio's overall population shrunk by about 13,000 people, largely because native-born people are having fewer kids and moving away from the state. But it would have shrunk by about 60,000 more people if it weren't for immigrants. But wanted to ask you guys, I know immigrants have a higher labor force participation rate in Greater Columbus than native-born people, but it's not, people don't always have an easy time finding a job or finding a quality job that matches their skills. So I wanted to ask you guys, what are some of the unique barriers or challenges that immigrants face in finding a job in Greater Columbus, and what are some of the solutions?
I'll start there, and I talk about this in my book, but there are two primary issues with immigrants and them finding work in corporate. The first is usually the foreign education bias, right? And there's this feeling in our workplace, right? And even our certifications, the certifications that we have that you require. I'm an engineer. I started my career as an engineer, and there's the PE and that kind of certification for engineering. Well, if you look at the rules for what gets you a certificate, you have to have gone to an accredited United States engineering school. Now, I don't mean to be rash about this, but the law of gravity is the same whether you learn it in Arabic or whether you learn it in English or whether you learn it in Spanish. And so when we have these barriers to our certification programs in the United States, it causes issues for foreign educated immigrants that may not have come here for college but may be immigrating for a job to get that certification, because that requires them going back to school, similar to what you did to get their certification. The second thing is also accent bias, right? So the way our accents sound, there's a bias there around whether colleagues can understand you or work with you. I have a particular story of where there was an opening for a job, and a team had kind of done the shortlisting for the job, right? And they had shortlisted them to 3 people and moved it on to a manager. And a manager had to call these candidates, and I was checking in with the manager and said, hey, did you make the calls? And the manager told me, I did, but I vetoed one just because I couldn't understand them on the phone. And based on the fact I can't understand them on the phone means I'm not likely to understand them when I'm working with them. And so there's this accent bias that creates communication friction. But I tend to say, right, I don't know if you've ever been in rooms to listen to people with accents. It forces you to actually pay attention, right? So if we're going to talk about the benefit of an accent, the benefit of an accent is actually makes you listen, and you're an active listener as opposed to just yeah-yaying everything. So these 2 things create issues with immigrants finding work, especially in corporate, and my space is corporate, and that's what I see. But this also applies in communities. I see this in community groups of people that serve. They experience similar feelings. And so we talk about how do we solve some of these problems. Well, I think first of all, our workplaces have to relook. First of all, certification programs have their work to do, and I know Guadalupe, you and I have talked about what all these certification programs are doing around accreditation. Let's take a critical look at that. Within the workplace itself, communication should be limited to, did you understand the information that was conveyed, and not, was the information conveyed in the way that you want your ears to hear it, right? And we need managers kind of trained at understanding that an accent is not a judgment of your leadership capabilities, or capacity, or your ability to do the job. I think once your colleagues start to, and management starts to rethink about that, then we're going to start seeing immigrants thrive better in the workplace. Because here's the reality, right? Immigrants are going to make up 1 in 5 people in the workplace by 2035. It's from the American Immigration Council. These are the stats, right? Immigrants are, 49% of immigrants hold bachelor's degrees, right? Which is higher than a native. And so we have these highly skilled immigrants, right, that enter the workplace. And here's another stat, right? They are paid 17% less. So we have a wage gap. An engineer that's an immigrant versus an engineer that's a local is going to make 17% less for the same job. We catch up, but we catch up eventually by losing the accent, right? Becoming more American, but that's a problem that takes 10 to 15 years to resolve in the workplace.
And you're losing, right, that generational wealth when you're starting out. I also wanted to add that, because part of that was what solutions, right? And so some of the solutions are employers also reconsidering part-time and temporary work. There was a study on poverty, and no one gets out of poverty doing temporary and part-time work. It's almost literally impossible. Also, tuition reimbursement. So here's an example. Here, we have 2 examples of one person who went back, and I knew many people who went back to school and started from scratch, who already had 2 and 3 degrees here in the United States, but I mean here in Central Ohio. Also, having ESLs, things like having ESL at the workplace. I know Walmart was doing it like 10 years ago, but Ohio State Medical Wexner Center, they're doing it now. And so definitely looking at ways. I know we're having a conversation with Adam H. They're very much advocating for the credentialing. We have so many social workers and doctors, medical doctors. Ohio has the largest unemployed and underemployed immigrant population in the United States. And that was from a study that we did with the Ohio Legal Aid Society for the state of Ohio. So again, we're losing a lot. We're losing brain waste, we're losing economic, economic contribution, but so much more.
To speak on solutions as well, we are, again, 3-generation family English program is serving children. So picture full families, infants all the way to grandparents. So an entire family can come to one place, one time, and every single person in the family gets the education they uniquely need to go from surviving to thriving. So babies, toddlers, and preschoolers get preschool, early education, kindergarten through 8th grade get homework help, teenagers are volunteering, parents get 7 levels of English. So you can see it's a full encompassing program of education that helps people move. So this is workforce development. We have, again, 2 locations. We've taught 2 organizations how to do this. Our goal is 20 locations in Central Ohio, serving 10,000 people. That's a tipping point in this city, and we are passionate and moving at that trajectory. That's, again, workforce development for today. Parents tell me in America, this is a quote, in America, if I don't know English, it negatively affects every area of my life. Another woman just said to us, if I don't know English in this country as an immigrant, I don't feel like a human. So people are saying, I want to learn English. We've done the research because it didn't exist in Central Ohio. We've done it twice. We just finished it the second time in January. There are so few adult English programs in this city that 4% of foreign-born people can find one. 4%. So again, if you can't speak English, it's really hard to get a job at the level of where your education is, or get an education to get a job at a higher level. We also started, so that's, again, workforce development for 20 years from now, 8 to 10 years from now, 5 years from now, and for today is family English programming, in my opinion. Second of all, we started Festa Business ESL. So one of our donors, Kimball Midwest, came to us a couple years ago and said, we have more foreign-born employees at our company than we ever had. They just celebrated 100 years. And they said, can we get our employees into your program? Well, we have a waiting list we never get through, friends. We don't get through it. And so we went to them and said, what if we come and teach your associates English and your manager Spanish? There's a million languages, but what if we started with Spanish at your manager level? We've been doing that for a year. So these pieces are replicatable, scalable, and that's how we're working toward the solution.
I just want to add what the possibility is. So even states, Tennessee changed their legislation to allow for more individuals who have credentials, internationally trained professionals, to be able to work in their state. Utah. So it's not just the Massachusetts, right, and Washington State, but even Oregon. The governor did an executive order to ask the credentialing boards to make it easier, not give anything away, right? Just loosen those guidelines so that people who have this international skill set can work here in the United States and in Ohio. So if you want to know what you can do, please help us advocate, right?
Great. Well, thank you all. I know that the Metropolitan Club always takes questions from the audience, and we also have people tuning in online. So if you have a question, please make your way to the back where Doug has the microphone back there. And if you're online, please type your question in the chat. But before we'll go straight to that.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you to today's panelists. Great conversation. Lots of questions coming in. So I wanted to make sure that we tried to answer as many as we could. Here's a question. Ed Hoffman. Ed Hoffman asks, actually, let me give the ground rules before we start. Great questions at CMC have 2 things in common. They take about 30 seconds or less to ask, and they do end with a question mark. So Ed Hoffman asks, a city council-sponsored study estimated that over 100,000 Columbus citizens might lack current government-issued ID. Do you support the creation of a local municipal ID, like ones in Chicago, Philadelphia, Cincinnati, Kansas City, et cetera, to make Columbus a more welcoming city?
So I worked for the city of Columbus for 12 years under Mayor Coleman and Mayor Gunther. So I'm not talking on behalf of them, but I definitely met a lot of organizations and individuals who wanted to see that passed. I remember we even worked with the city of Detroit, even also passed this ID. So my experience in the cohorts, national cohorts that I'm in, is yes, it makes a tremendous difference to have an ID. And it's not just for immigrants, right? This would also be for those that are unhoused that may have lost their ID, individuals suffering from mental health. So, you know, it's called targeted universalism when you look at, you know, how a policy can help everyone, but we have to target certain populations in order for them to be able to benefit from that universal policy. So an ID would definitely help.
Hey y'all, thank you so much for being here. This has been very helpful. I'm Dr. Andrea Weisberger, and I'm the Director of Education at the Buckeye Ranch, a mental health agency here in Columbus. I was wondering, you had spoke about the trauma and mental health struggles experienced specifically about refugees. Can you share what you see as ways we can best support the mental health of both immigrants and refugees, specifically here in Columbus, but also the greater Ohio area?
Thank you. I think that's one area that I work and specialize on immigrant refugee mental health. I have partnered with researchers at Ohio State University and NIH to understand the implications of mental health in the refugee immigrant community. We had seen quite disturbing data coming out, but let's go into the solutions. We all know that there's a higher amount of mental illness in society among the resettled refugees. And among all resettled refugees, Bhutanese, Nepali tend to be at the top of the ladder. And unfortunately, that's the reality. However, what we had been advocating and working with, including with Adam Board recently, is how do you come up with a community-based intervention solutions? Now, we do have great interventions here in the United States, but what's lacking is that the data does not support the community. The data is not coming. The intervention was not designed based on the refugee experience. If my therapist do not ask me questions about my experiences in a refugee camp, if my therapist don't know if family separation or persecution of my family member in Bhutan is the cause of my mental illness, if my therapist don't know how to ask questions, or if they are not trained how to ask questions about how family separation is causing the anxiety that I'm going through, and if my therapists don't know how to ask questions about why cultural barriers and linguistic barriers is the cause of anxiety and depression among the refugees, it's not going to address. That's why we have worked with Ohio State University, and I continue to work and propose ideas that there are organic ways to address mental health in each of the refugee community. Now, I can give you an example about working in the Bhutanese community. What it had worked was group therapy, group yoga, gardening, what we call vajan, which is a chanting on the weekends. People come together and they do chantings. That kind of organic community activities has alleviated mental illness way much better than when people go see a therapist. I've been pushing, I'm a trained mental health therapist, and I would love to see people come to me, but however, it does not work. Talk therapy, one-on-one talk therapy does not work in my community. And here's what I wanted to say, and being very, very honest to my own profession, is that if I come up with a solution that works for my community, it's not going to work for Somali community or Burmese community or Iraqi community. This fact we have to understand as a mental health providers. What happened in the last 10 years is we tried to push a square peg into a round hole. And the therapists, the researchers, the providers fail to understand that this is a different set of populations. They have different values, different ideas and norms about what it means to be in a position that they are, whether it's mentally well or mentally ill. And until and unless we factor out those basic fundamental ideas about the culture and understanding about mental health, the fantastic EMDR is not going to work. Sorry to pick EMDR. But that's.
Could I say something really quick to that? I'll be quick, but the therapy piece is huge. The day-to-day piece that you could be a part of very easily. One of our moms said to me, I was home alone, isolated for 3 years before I found this family English program. I didn't leave my house for 3 years. So on top of the trauma before she got here, that's a whole nother level. So the ACEs study, and Dr. Kevin Dixon helped me learn, you can get healing from trauma in a loving community. We can build loving community. We have them at Festa, come volunteer. We can build a relationship, a friendship across lines of difference with someone who feels really alone and isolated. That helps people's mental health. It increases people's mental health.
just want to add that cultural competency, cultural humility, it's a verb, it's an action. If you have an opportunity to get training on it, no one is asking anyone to change. It's a communication tool. So please take as much workshops as you can and learn about our neighbors.
Hi, good afternoon. Such a pleasure to be here. So my question, I'm an immigrant, very proud immigrant. I came here to this country when I was 19, and now I'm still a young 19-year-old with 25 years of experience. But the question that I always get asked is, where are you from? And most of the time, obviously, I'm proud to be African, proud to be American, been a citizen for almost 20 years. How do you answer that question? And I guess I'll direct this to Kemi, because most of the time, the question can come from a place where you sound different, you don't belong. I've been in situations where people have said, well, if you don't like it here, why don't you just move back to where you came from? And I'm like, so how do you answer that question? And how do you, living in two different worlds, kind of, so to speak?
Yeah, no, thanks for that question. And I get that question a lot myself. Guadalupe, you brought up cultural competence. I think this is a skill that we all need, because it's always about how the question is asked, right? It generally is asked not from a place of curiosity, right? Because sometimes when I say, oh, Upper Arlington, they're like, where are you really from? Right? So you can always tell that the question was really directed at what's your origin, right? So cultural competence will say, if you're asking that question, what's your place of origin, not where you from, right? That's just the cultural tactic in how you ask the question, right? Because Guadalupe, I imagine you're asked that question, but you're from Lorraine, right? And so, the answer to that question for me is generally always using the opportunity to advance cultural competence, because at the end of the day, I know that if we can make the conversation about curiosity. Listen, I know you asked that question because you want to know where am I nationally from, right? My national identity, and not really where I'm from, as you asked it. You give the person that asked the question an opportunity to be trained and ask someone else that question a little bit better. Here's the thing. America is the land of immigrants, and so sometimes I'm frustrated that for a land of immigrants, we haven't gotten it right. If any other country in the world should know this or do this well, it actually should be our country. We literally have been doing it from the beginning of time, right? As opposed to other countries. So it really is about using it to advance curiosity when that question is asked. Thank you.
About three, maybe 4 minutes left for a couple more questions.
Afternoon, Michael Wilkos, United Way of Central Ohio. Historically, the United States has been described as a melting pot, which meant there was this pressure to blend into this new identity, where other countries like Canada are more of a salad bowl. What do you wish Columbus would be doing differently to strengthen cultural communities around entrepreneurialism, housing supports, and so those communities can keep their identity and thrive and participate in Central Ohio's economic systems?
Great question, and I haven't even given you the manuscript for my book yet. But since we're using food analogies, right, I would hope that Columbus, we aspire to be more of a stew, right? A melting pot, and if anyone has ever been to the melting pot chain restaurant, right, is this idea that you all melt into each other and you're this monoculture. It's a term I don't like at all, right? Because it's a one-way, it forces assimilation, which is a one-way process, which means you melt into this pot and become like this, right? The salad bowl analogy is also a little off to me because you're all in the same bowl, but you can pick out the tomatoes if you want, you can pick out the lettuce if you want, you can pick out your onions if you want, right? And so you tend to pick what part of the salad you want to eat, and if you're like my children, you put the onions aside, the tomatoes never gets eaten. And so it doesn't work for belonging either. A stew, on the other hand, and I'm by no means any cook, but I do love to eat. A stew, on the other hand, you can still identify all the ingredients in that stew, right? But it's bound by that broth and that it's just the right, it's integration. And a stew is what we want. We want to all be integrated, right? You can take the potatoes out of the stew, but still taste the lamb or still taste the curry or whatever in that bowl. So our aspiration should be a stew.
To expand, so integration looks like this. That means the responsibility isn't solely on the newcomer, whether the newcomer is an immigrant or foreign-born individual or just coming from another state. It is our responsibility as the receiving community to be welcoming, right? That we only benefit from that.
We have about 1 minute left.
Thank you for hosting this conversation, for everybody tuning in and listening. I'm so excited just that the conversation is happening. My question is, I'm inspired. I'm so excited that we're having the topic. What are some actionable next steps? If I have a neighbor, if I'm a teacher, if I have a business, what is one actionable, quick next step that I can do when I walk out this door so that the conversation doesn't end today?
Start by saying, number one, if someone comes to you to talk to you about this, as a business, as a government, as a stakeholder, take the meeting, please, take the meeting. Help us advocate. We can only advocate as a coalition. So I'll start with that.
I'll invite you to September 28th. We're having a Columbus International Festival, our second one. Last year, 2,000 people came from 70 countries. Come, meet more people.
Where's the festival?
Franklin County Fairgrounds, September 28th. wearefesta.org.
Oh, okay. I'll hop on in again. Cultural competence. There's a lot of different people that train on this. Please, and I know corporations are starting to do a better job at it. Please indulge, take a class on it. Read books. There's not a plug for my book, but especially in the corporate space, I think that's where we see a lot of segregation happening in the corporate space, and that's why immigrants leave corporations and start things, right? So immigrants are like the highest entrepreneurs, not because they can't work, it's because they don't thrive in the workplace, so they start their own thing.
I'm getting the signal that we have to wrap up, so sorry, Sudarshan. Okay, quickly.
Is mic on? Okay. So I think there are great examples, but one of the examples that I wanted to share, which is practical, is since Columbus Dispatch decided to hire an immigrant reporter, Peter Gill, a lot of conversation has changed recently. I think the media, the public media, and then the corporate media really changes the way we think about immigrants or ourselves. And so I think one of the work that we need to do is the media need to take responsibility about sharing facts rather than coming up with some fancy stories. And really change the way we think about this issue. And there are many avenues, but I really give credit to what the Columbus Dispatch has done in the last 2 years. It's really changed us the way they saw immigrants in Central Ohio. I think media need to do more work.
Okay, with that, we will wrap it up. I want to thank today's presenting sponsors, the United Way of Central Ohio and TAF Law. Thank you to the presenting sponsor of today's live stream, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and to the Ellis and the Columbus Dispatch for their support. A very special appreciation to our speakers, Kim Emsch, Yukimi Owakis-Essen, I knew I'd mess it up, Jeter, Sudarshan Piakurel, Guadalupe Velasquez, and our host, Peter Gill. Please make plans now to attend next Wednesday's forum. Okay, we can go ahead and give them a round of applause. Please make plans now to attend next Wednesday's forum. Green is the New Growth, Central Ohio's Sustainable Future, presented in partnership with the COSI Science Festival. Thank you, everyone, again. Have a great afternoon.